Robert begins to describe how his rich dad shaped his early understanding of money by teaching him ideas that were very different from what he heard at home. His real father believed in steady work, fixed income, and safe choices. He always said that a stable job was the best path in life. But Rich Dad believed that real strength comes from learning how money moves and how a person can guide that movement. Robert noticed that Rich Dad talked about chances, learning, courage, and the ability to see value where others see nothing. These ideas were new for him, but they slowly changed the way he looked at work and education. He started to understand that money is not only earned through effort, but also through building assets that grow with time. This lesson began to shape his future thinking and opened his mind to a wider world where knowledge about money becomes a tool for freedom. As Robert spends more time with his rich dad, he begins to understand that financial learning does not come from school books. It comes from watching how money behaves in real situations. Rich Dad takes him to different parts of the town and shows him how businesses grow, why some fail, and how smart people study patterns before making a move. Robert learns that most people work for money, while a few learn how to make money work for them. This idea stays in his mind as he observes people who rush for paychecks, yet remain stuck in the same place year after year. Rich Dad explains that freedom begins when a person understands assets, income flow, and the difference between desires and needs. Robert sees that Rich Dad studies numbers, markets, and people with a calm and clear mind. This approach inspires him to think beyond regular jobs and to consider choices that create long-term progress. Robert begins to understand that fear controls many people when it comes to money. Rich Dad teaches him that the fear of losing is what keeps most people trapped in the same routine. People avoid learning new ideas because they worry about failure or others' opinions. Robert watches how Rich Dad handles challenges with patience instead of fear. He learns that mistakes are part of growth and that every lesson carries value if a person pays attention. Rich Dad explains that confidence grows when a person studies money, listens to the market, and takes thoughtful action, rather than acting from worry. Robert starts to notice how his own thinking changes. Instead of asking if something is safe, he begins to ask how something can be improved. Instead of waiting for chances, he begins to look for them. This shift becomes one of the most important steps in his development because it teaches him that the mind is the real source of wealth. Rich Dad also teaches Robert about the importance of building skills instead of focusing only on earning money. He explains that knowledge of communication, sales, marketing, management, and decision-making is more valuable than a paycheck. Robert learns that working only for money keeps people dependent, while learning skills creates independence. He sees how Rich Dad uses knowledge to solve problems, negotiate deals, and create opportunities that others miss. Robert begins to understand that financial intelligence is a combination of practical experience, learning from mistakes, and observing patterns. He realizes that money follows those who can think clearly, take risks wisely, and act with confidence. Slowly, Robert starts to adopt these habits in small ways. He begins to see life as a series of choices where careful thinking and action. This lesson becomes a foundation for how he approaches investments and business later in life. Finally, Robert learns from Rich Dad that surrounding yourself with the right people is essential for growth. He notices that people who fear risk, complain, or avoid learning often remain stuck. Rich Dad encourages spending time with those who build, create, invest, and think positively about opportunities. Robert understands that mindset and environment shape financial success more than luck or formal education. He also learns to focus on assets that generate income rather than spending on liabilities. This shift in thinking allows him to plan for long-term freedom. By the end of this part, Robert has a clear understanding that knowledge, courage, observation, and careful action, combined with a supportive environment, are the keys to building wealth and achieving financial independence in a way that school alone cannot teach.